From an emerging leader to a leader in crisis, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. His ratings in France are near a record low. But now he wants to lead the European Union. And in the process, he's turning into Europe's greatest embarrassment. Yesterday, he was in the Netherlands. Macron delivered yet another speech. He was heckled. Protesters openly challenged the French president. And the entire affair was caught on camera. Take a look at this.
I do admire Nexus Institute, what you do and how much you delivered such strong messages, not just for Europe, but for humanity and our common values. Hello.
I think we lost something. Where is French democracy? Where did we lose it?
I can answer this question if you give me some time.
You have millions of people in the street.
So the people shouted him down. His voice was drowned. And he could make himself heard only after the protesters were removed. Who were these protesters? Who were the people who were heckling Macron? Mostly students. They came with banners. One of them said this: "President of violence and hypocrisy." Macron seemed unfazed. Once the protesters were removed, he continued with a straight face.
And a democracy is exactly a place where you can demonstrate, you can have, as in your country, this type of interventions.
It's a good try, but it did not help. He's under fire for his comments on China and Taiwan. Last week, the French president was in China. He got a grand reception in Beijing. This week, he's in the Netherlands with more pomp and pageantry. Macron met the Dutch king. There was a 42-gun salute in his honor and a gala dinner. The French president is on a state visit, the first one for the Netherlands in 23 years. But the people are not half as welcoming. They are protesting. And the people at home are also protesting. For weeks, France has been in turmoil. Macron pushed a controversial pension reform. He raised the age of retirement from 62 to 64. The people of France are up in arms. They want to retire early and get pension benefits. There's an uprising of sorts against the president. There have been violent protests. Macron did not bother with the parliament's consent. He just rammed the policy through. He used special presidential powers to push the reform, and now he's chasing global leadership. His new cause is Europe's independence, strategic independence, a bit like non-alignment. Macron wants Europe to stop leaning on America, to walk the middle path, and to become what he calls the third world power. It's an interesting idea. It also sounds good on paper, you could say. But when Macron tried to articulate it, he sparked a diplomatic crisis. Consider some of his recent statements, and I'm quoting. "Do we Europeans have an interest in speeding up the subject of Taiwan? No. The worst of things would be to think that we Europeans must be followers on this subject and adapt ourselves to an American rhythm and a Chinese overreaction. We will not have the time nor the means to finance our own strategic autonomy, and we will become vassals." Allow me to sum up what Emmanuel Macron tried to say here. He said Europe should not become a vassal state of America, and that it should avoid being drawn into a conflict over Taiwan. These words have led to a backlash. European lawmakers are in a bind. Some of them are trying to distance themselves from Macron. Listen to what one of the European lawmakers had to say, and I'm quoting again. Macron says Europe should, and we Europeans, but he speaks for France. He can't really speak for Europe. And here's what a German lawmaker said. Macron had turned his trip to China into a PR coup for Xi and a foreign policy disaster for Europe. So what really happened here? Macron tried taking a more radical approach. Perhaps he got carried away, and it backfired. Now Paris is trying some damage control. For one of his interviews, the Elysee Palace laid down special conditions. They insisted on checking and proofreading Macron's quotes. This was one of the conditions for the interview. So are they suggesting that he's being misquoted? They haven't said so yet, but they did censor some of his statements. Reports say some quotes on Taiwan were removed from a recent interview. So was Emmanuel Macron censored by his own team? Are they worried that he's going a step too far? Either way, the damage is done. Europe finds itself in an awkward position, and it must pacify its rattled allies.